Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and thanks for that kind welcome, Peter. We're going to be talking now, just taking a lot of what the earlier speakers have been talking about and crystallizing them into finding some answers from people who are actually working very much in this field of internet connectivity, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are trying to use the internet for social good. So some of the things we're going to be asking is, what is the potential for an internet economy in South Africa? What are the conditions that we need to have to boost innovation and entrepreneurship? And then we're going to look at some of the examples of success here in South Africa and in other parts of the continent. Our first panelist is Dr. Betange Ndemo. He is immediate former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Information and Communications in Kenya. Currently teaches entrepreneurship and research methods at the University of Nairobi's Business School and conducts research on social entrepreneurship. Please welcome Dr. Ndemo. Our next panelist is Marlon Parker, who is a social entrepreneur and advocate of using digital media and mobile technology for social good. Marlon, please join us on stage. Preston Bush is the founder and managing partner at 88 miles per hour. It's a seed accelerator for mobile web startups in Africa. Offices in Nairobi and Cape Town. A serial entrepreneur turned investor with experience spanning 15 years. Preston, please join us on stage. And last but certainly not least is Justin Stanford, who's an entrepreneur and venture investor from Cape Town, founder, CEO, director, advisor, and investor to various companies in the tech sector. Please welcome Justin to the stage.
Over there?
Yeah. Looks like Cape Town is our Silicon Valley. Right. I think let's maybe start with the overall question about this internet economy. I am a technophobe, so I'm going to ask each of you firstly to explain to me, to us, what that would look like, and is South Africa ready for a tech economy?
Oh, it's certainly ready. I think I sort of have felt in my lifetime that it's like the internet's like the industrial revolution of my generation.
Yeah.
And the potential is immense. There are a lot of barriers getting in the way, which we need to sort out. But I thought, let me share a statistic with the minister, if he doesn't mind looking up for 2 minutes. You spoke about agriculture being 2% of our economy and things like that. The NVCA, which is the Association of Venture Capitalists in America, do a very interesting study on the impact of the venture capital, the high-tech startup industry in the US. And the stat that leaped out for me most was that 0.2% of US GDP is the amount of venture capital money put behind new high-tech startups every year. Venture-backed startups are responsible by revenue for 21% of US GDP. So a fifth of US GDP can be traced back to venture capital-backed high-growth startups. I think that's incredible, and that's coming out of people's minds, and that's enabled by things like the internet. So that gives you an idea of what the potential could be. We're a resource-driven country at the moment, but imagine if a fifth of our GDP could be foreign earnings from global IP-based companies that were backed and formed right here.
Yeah, and what I want to talk about as well, and we'll come back to this, and it's interesting, the economic link that you make. And it says to me that it's not just about creating the infrastructure that Robin was talking about, and not just the policy that Robin was talking about, but it goes to education. It goes to investing in other sectors of the economy that will enable this internet economy. But just touching on the policy issue, Robin makes the point, Dr. Ndemo, that policy is, of course, an enabler of ICT and innovation, and yet policymakers on the continent don't seem to get this. How did you get it right as the father of broadband in Kenya?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. The problem we have, and this is in every country, is that we are using analog people to create a digital economy. And In, in Kenya, we started with a very simple policy goals, very simple policy goals. And we made sure that up to the president, they understood it. Because all the reports that we used to have, nobody quite read them. So we did a two-pager to explain to the political class, which you actually need to execute some of the things. So we said we need infrastructure, and we need to have open access infrastructure, where the government invested resources in the creation of teams. But as we did that, there was so much resistance from the media itself, saying this is another white elephant in Africa. This explains that why you would succeed. But we remained firm on what we wanted to achieve with infrastructure and in an open access format. Of course, when media rights, it gets into anti-corruption agencies. Yeah. I remember I spent many hours explaining policemen that we are laying cable from Middle East up to Mombasa. And they would say that you say you lay some fiber under the ground, because they were not able to understand. And these are the dynamics, because some people don't quite understand what you're talking about.
So you'd say that a big part of it is about political will. There's got to be that.
Political will is number one, and you must be firm. Someone has to carry the vision and stay with it. Otherwise, if you waver when the media attacks, when all kinds of agencies come to look at you, then you actually lose the direction. Yeah. So the second one, we said we must create content. We must be able to develop applications that would assist people. This is what you're seeing from Nigeria now. And then we must encourage innovation. Most African countries, you could hardly see the word innovation and the country together, but you're beginning to see this coming along. And what you've seen come out of Kenya, you've seen applications like M-Pesa, you have seen Ushahidi, you have seen iCow, you have seen M-Shamba. M-Shamba has improved productivity. This is the one that gives information to farmers. iCow, for example, has improved on productivity. And this is, I'm saying this to show you how cross-cutting ICT is, not just those areas. We have done many studies and pilots, especially in the area of healthcare. In Kenya, we did one with Accenture, and we can tell you confidently that we can reduce up to 40% of the healthcare costs if we deployed IT, because there is a lot of loopholes and things. Then we moved to digitized registries like the land registry in Kenya. After digitization and closing the corruption loopholes, revenue moved from 800 million to 9 billion in 6 months. Wow. And you would think everybody celebrated, then we get more resistance because it was going to create more. And what the government, one of the areas that we succeeded most is that we persuaded the president to agree that we free up data. Otherwise, the developers would not be able to find anything to do without the data. So Kenya became one of the first countries to join the open data movement, and is still up to date. It is very, very critical that we begin to develop the culture of research. We begin to free up the data. That's how we can impact on our lives, because that explains, you see department stores gathering data, but they have not been doing analytics. This is where we come on the educational systems, that it must be impacted. So as we were doing this, we were going around the universities to tell them that we actually need to crunch these numbers and be able to make sense out of it. That is how we can be able to free up. So you do the marketing with the political side, you do the marketing, because most universities in Africa are ivory towers. They don't know how to relate with industry, they don't know how to relate with the innovators. The innovators are young, most of these professors are old. This is the challenge that we have.
Industry tells us that our universities are not producing the right kind of skill set to do
we
what
would
we
have
need
to spend, the question the minister was asking here, how can we do it? we must we must do the finishing job, because it's going to take very long to change what the academics do, and to be able to incorporate how to prepare someone for the 21st century,
All right.
10 years coming.
Let me bring Marlon into this conversation. I would assume that if one has a proposition to do social good, that would just be, everyone would welcome it and make your life easier. Has your life been made easier?
I wish. I just had a call this morning and our lines are again not working. I think one of the big things that maybe just to share a little story quickly. About 3 years ago, there was a young man who came from a little place called Mannenberg. It's in the media at the moment.
Yes.
For all the wrong reasons. He's a school dropout. He's been unemployed for a number of years. And he basically comes up to me and says, Marlon, you know, we've got this massive problem of youth unemployment. And I said, yes, okay, fine. And I asked him, what is your big problem? And he says, my biggest problem is that I'm unemployed. And when he told me that, I got very excited. I'm like, wow, that's the best thing I've ever heard. You're unemployed for a number of years. And he thought I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
And then basically I told him, I said, you know, in any other industry, if you have more than 5 years experience in something, you become a consultant. You should become an unemployment consultant. And the one thing I then realized was that the people in a lot of our communities, they are the ones they are the problem experts.
Yeah.
And because he came through one of our programs where we taught him and we showed him the power of the internet using his mobile phone. I then basically told him that all these frustrations that you have, can you actually apply that onto some idea that we can put on the mobile phone? Long story short, today he's a technology entrepreneur who's got this little, it's basically kind of like LinkedIn for the poor. It's specifically geared for semi-skilled and unskilled workers. And he basically started this, we built a team around him. He then got excited because he could then do research. He could then see the opportunities that was there. And he's currently got over 300,000 people on his platform, and 17% of that base has been able to find work because of this young man from Mannenberg. Now that clearly showed us that if we are able to provide more people with inclusive access,
Yeah.
right? Anybody, doesn't matter who you are, there's something that you're basically giving the power to the people. And of course, the other thing that we realize is very important, and you've mentioned it earlier, is the whole thing about education and creating an environment where people can actually build these abilities and the skills that is needed. And that is some of the key things that we found in our journey.
And how do we build those skills? I mean, we talked a little bit about the disconnect
Yes.
between industry and our universities. We know the problems with our basic education system and kids doing maths literacy instead of, you know, for pure mathematics and science like we used to do back in the day.
One of the techniques that we basically, because most of the people that come through our programs are people that's got no formal education. So we don't even go to the place where it's mathematics. But everybody in Africa has a story to share. So we actually use storytelling as a medium for people to actually learn. And what we've tried to do is we try to really kind of create a little Google culture right there in the midst of the Cape Flats, where it's fun to learn. It's not just about, okay, I need to know all of these things, because there's a lot of things that they learn that really is just unnecessary. We understand it is, I mean, if someone, for example, has an issue that they've got a family member that's got a problem with substance abuse, for example, you can't now tell this person you need to go and do all of these courses. If you can simply show this person that this is what you can do, that you can actually build something, that your family member can speak to a counselor, that will immediately make an impact.
Yeah.
And the person don't need to do a 3-4 year degree. And I think that was some of the things that we had to do, purely based on the needs that was within the community.
Kristen, my idea of an internet entrepreneur is a guy tinkering in his garage for a couple of months and then coming up with a brilliant idea and then coming to you and selling it. Am I off the mark?
No, that's very correct. We invest in very early stage companies, so basically 2-3 guys. And then instead of trying to research, I mean, these people are trying to disrupt, so it's very hard to go out and find research papers of whether this idea will work or not. Then it's better to give them a bit of money and then let them try it. So we invest $10,000 to $40,000, put them 10 companies, we do 10 companies at the same time, put them together.
Yeah.
And then basically see how do they act as people, as entrepreneurs, because it's super hard to execute these these businesses, you need very, very skilled, and very few people can actually pull it off. So during the 3 months, it's kind of like a due diligence process and seeing like, is these people somebody we can recommend to investors like Justin to put further money into and try to scale. So we try to basically focus on creating companies.
Where do you find them? And give us some examples when you've done some work here in South Africa and in Kenya as well. What sort of people are they? Because we're going to be talking about education.
It's like people are very different. I think it's very hard to come straight out of university and do a startup. If you look at the US, I think it's only 4% of all venture capital that goes to people under 27. So the Facebook and the Google is actually the exemption. So it's normally people who've been out in industries, know a specific sector well, and that can and know that problem that can come in and do it. But like examples, our probably greatest success is actually an investment banker that turned entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And he's actually in the nest. He's just raised. He's raised over $18 million after joining our program 7 months ago. Unfortunately for South Africa, he needs to actually leave the country because he was not capable of staying in the country because of exchange controls.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that guy.
So this is obviously it's a positive story, but also a bit sad for.
And let's talk a bit about that. Maybe you can help me here as well. Why is it that some of our really, really great internet entrepreneurs don't stay? They seem to reach some sort of a top level, a glass ceiling or something, and then go and move into other parts of either the continent or the rest of the world?
Well, this is a real can of worms, and it's probably Creston and my personal bugbears.
Yeah.
I think it's twofold. The first is simpler. It's getting closer access to markets and to investment money. But that's what you need. You need access to global. The internet provides a global, borderless, politicalless trading environment. It's the ultimate free market. And really that's what you need. You need that, and you need to access capital to back your businesses. In South Africa, we are burdened with a very tough, very unfriendly regulatory environment, which cuts us out of a lot of that. So I think that it disincentivizes high-growth entrepreneurs to stay here naturally. So as Christian said, a lot of them are basically forced through necessity to leave, which is really a pity. And although we're trying our best to keep a lot of them here, I'd say that most of the young entrepreneurs that come to me looking for venture finance also ask me for help on structuring themselves out of the country and out of the regulatory net. So that is one of my little crusades.
Give me an example of a red tape issue that if the minister could get rid of it tomorrow, then your life would be 50% easier.
You'll probably have to chat to his colleague over at finance, mostly.
Okay.
In our industry, probably the biggest bugbear is the exchange controls problem. It makes it difficult for us to... Oh, it's my microphone. Okay, my microphone's acting up.
That's on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'd say that in our industry, exchange controls is one of the biggest problems we have, which is a legacy law going back to the 60s. And it essentially sets all kinds of rules and regulations on how we may transact with currency and global commerce. Yeah. For instance, in a country like Zambia, they don't have them. In South Africa, we do. So it cuts us out of a lot of the simplicity and ease of the global internet economy. Global payment mechanisms, the use of dollars, and it makes it. The other thing it discourages is the venture capital itself, the cash itself. A lot of the reasons people leave is to go and find the money, the venture money. I'm one of the few people, along with Creston, that are trying to make it work here.
Yeah.
It's made very difficult by these regulations, so it scares the money away as well. So we are trying, but we fight a daily battle with this environment. I think we're burdened by an environment that is legacy, and the environment we're in now is very global.
Do you want to pick up on that?
Just to give a very concrete example, if you have a South African startup and then you can't get that seeking funding, let's say from angel investors. It's impossible to, it's very, like foreign investors don't want to invest in that South African company because of exchange control. Does it exit? They have problems retrieving the profits. So investors, don't want to invest if they can't get the profit out. On the other hand, if then the South African entrepreneur moves his company offshore, then he can get the foreign money, but the local angel, who might be very important for him executing the business here, cannot invest him in now because of looping structure.
Okay.
So basically, you can have a foreign investor and a local investor go in and start up together.
Wow. All right. And what's the experience in Kenya, Dr. Temba?
Actually,
It's on. That one works. I'm not sure about this one. Yeah.
This one.
Well, I think they both work. Whichever one you like.
Actually, I want to thank South Africa regulatory framework because it benefits us greatly. And this is one area that is very key if you want to retain investors in your country. And I see some try to operate from Kenya to South Africa. But it's one of those areas where you say, if the country can't see where Africans will just benefit from the other side. Yeah.
So we've helped Kenya
Yes.
in at least one way.
Greatly.
Well, we're happy for you. And on your front, I mean, would you find, what would you say are the key things that would make, or at least enable, the kind of social entrepreneurship that you practice?
I think one of the big things, very much to what they said, is it is the whole thing about firstly the environment, and so the policymakers has got a big role to play, as we know. But the other key thing as well is my big concern has always been that there's a massive divide when it comes to the kind of entrepreneurs that we're talking about and the masses. And my big thing has always been, how do we actually begin to get those who understand the context to get involved in that kind of processes? So some of the things that we've been involved in, very much like what the guys at 88 has been doing, is setting up kind of incubation and acceleration spaces, doing some kind of very much like they do in the iHub, kind of co-creation spaces within communities generally that people wouldn't want to go into. Because our big thing is that not only are we, yes, they are now maybe being able to be connected, but can we actually get them into a place where they can begin to become the producers and the creators of the things that they need? Because clearly a lot of those needs are not always very high on the agenda. And that has really been one of our big things that we've been doing, is beginning to kind of create these little hubs, not just in South Africa. We're in places like Somalia, in Sierra Leone. So we try and go into places where nobody else wants to go into, where there's a lot of tension, because I do believe tension can be a catalyst for innovation.
And the infrastructure gap that we were
and
talking about, is that
generally,
limiting?
it's in all of these places. In Sierra Leone, for example, when our guys go over there, it's like $60 for 250 megs of data. So it's just insane. But yet everybody's on Facebook. I just kind of fear whenever they have to load their profiles. There goes a couple of dollars. But I think the big thing is around the kind of the environment, and of course the other big challenge is, even as Africa, as well, Africa Unite and Africa Rise, it's very difficult for us to really collaborate because of these things that's happening. For us, for example, when we want to very much want to invest in these kind of social entrepreneurs outside of South Africa even, it's very difficult for us. It costs us more money just to kind of try and do that. So we always have to try and find, can we actually kind of source it from elsewhere, which then means that we basically kind of lose that opportunity by working with these entrepreneurs.
All right. We're going to wrap up in a moment, and I want your top request for the minister. I'm sure someone's taking notes. I think it's disappeared, but don't worry. I'll take notes. I'll pass them on. Your top request to him for 2014. But first, we've got time for 2 questions from the floor. If there is a question, there's one there. Could you just wait for the microphone? Keep your hand up for me, please. There we go.
Thank you. Should I ask now or you?
Yes, you may. And just let us know who it's for as well.
Oh, it's for everyone.
Okay.
Okay. I work in the public sector. Sorry, it's a bit strange hearing my voice this loud.
Yeah, you get used to it.
I wanted to suggest that perhaps it's, I think it's coming out now, but that it's it's no longer useful to frame this debate in the context of the digital divide. I think things have moved on, and I think the evidence that we're seeing now, I work in the public sector, the evidence we're seeing now is that the digital divide is growing, that it's no longer useful to rely on the frameworks that we are currently using in terms of the World Bank, what it means to be connected, and so on and so on. I think we need to find different ways as South Africa for the internet to actually work for us. I think the current thinking at the moment, we need to expand. This is not working, basically.
Any suggestions?
Any suggestions? Well, you see, the problem that we have now is that we're all talking about the internet, how it's going to help people, but the evidence that it's not going to work. So we need to rely on civil society, academia to find solutions that are actually specific to our context.
Okay.
So perhaps look at the intellectual property regime and all those things, education, whether investment on the internet, for example, is better than investment in education and health and so on and so on.
Okay, that's fine. One more, you got that? I'll recap. Oh. Okay, I'm a woman, so I'll go with the woman. She's here. Sorry.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm from the retail sector in South Africa. I want to touch on the topic of innovation specifically, and separating it from e-commerce. I find that the field of innovation in South Africa as a whole is very, very underdeveloped. And when you look at business schools, there are 1 or 2 courses, like a 2-day course or a 3-day course, where they might touch on innovation, but there are no holistic degrees innovation. And I know for a fact that overseas, there are management schools that offer innovation degrees. So I just want to get the panel's thoughts on the field of innovation, and also just to comment in the corporate space. I find that the knock-on effect of this is that business leaders in South Africa, when it comes to innovation and leading an innovation strategy in their companies, the topic is often very fuzzy and vague, and they don't know how to approach it at all. So, your thoughts on that?
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to answer both questions, plus leave the message for the minister as we respond. So we'll start here and move that way.
Okay. Which is the microphone back?
Yeah,
There we go. Okay. So the first gentleman, he said, I liked what he said, we need to rely on civil society to find ways of solving our problems. I'm a free market kind of guy, so I really like that. I think he's absolutely right. And my answer to that is actually my message to the minister as well. Deregulate and civil society will do it. Get out the way and it will happen, exactly like it's happened everywhere else. So I couldn't agree with him more, he's quite right. On the next question. Firstly, I question whether innovation can be taught. I think it comes together with risk-taking, and there's certain kinds of people that just want to do that or naturally take to that. I think if you have the right environment, those people will emerge naturally. I agree with her completely. We do have a very conservative culture in this country. We're very risk-averse.
Yeah.
Corporates here are always behind the curve, compared to overseas. And in fact, it's something that makes it quite hard for innovative startups to get going here, because they often can't get these guys as their customers because they're just not willing to take the risk. Whereas I find in the States, it's quite the opposite. People are always looking for the next innovative young thing to completely change their business. So whether it can be taught or not, I'm not so sure about that. But what we do need is the right environment to encourage and foster that and keep it here at home, not chase it overseas. And that means we need venture capital, we need the right environment, we need the right culture, we need to celebrate people that take risks and that innovate. And we need to not pull them down when they fail, but rather help build them back up again. Absolutely. So I think there's a number of elements that need to come together, and we need to shrug off this legacy conservatism that we seem to have out here in SA, and embrace some of the wide open thinking that I've witnessed so much overseas.
Dr. Demo?
2 good questions. The first one on whether we should change the model. In Kenya, we saw a lot of failure in rural areas. simply because there is what economists call market failure. Here, the government needs to put a little more investment, but more important, we need to do a lot more local content, which is more relevant to the people. You can't take Google to, it's a Google event, yeah? To the rural areas, which has no local content. I think the speech we had from Nigeria will do it. Take connectivity there, provide the local content. Although in Kenya, the comedians, when you accent is a little bit Nigerian, they say, you've been downloading those things from Nigeria. But we need to do a lot more local content, and you would begin to see the rural areas accessing internet, and they will begin to do a lot more than they are doing at the moment. I quite agree on the second question on innovation, same thing as entrepreneurship. Africa must begin to change the culture. We have been in a culture of, I call it peasant culture, where as long as your stomach is full, you can't think beyond out there, and you cannot take the risk. The way we bring up our children says a lot. I mean, we stop this, stop doing that, stop whatever. And the child doesn't know what needs to be done. We need to leave them to explore, play with the computer. If you take your computer home and your child begins, stop, you will never see the innovation. And our risk-taking levels, we must begin to take the risk. And that's how we succeed. Can I say one thing? Yes. Now I chair what is called the Global Initiative on Affordable Internet. And I was told that I say good things about that. And I saw the minister has left. So I'm joining the class of INSAF to talk about internet accessibility. And what we've been doing in Kenya is to ask that most operators share infrastructure. Shared infrastructure would reduce the cost of CapEx, and that would translate into lower internet costs. We have come down from what used to be almost $1,000 for 10 meg to now below $10 for 10 meg. This is actually serious accessibility that we are beginning to see. And we need open access on fiber networks. Let competition be at the business level, not at the infrastructure level. This is where the government must put the money to see that the next 3 billion is connected by thinking very seriously how to invest in the infrastructure around internet. I had more things to say, but we'll say next time.
You'll get me into lots of trouble, Marlon.
I don't know. Yeah, so maybe just on the first one, and I just want to follow up on, I think cost is a big thing. For most people on the continent, being connected is a massive investment. It takes a huge amount of their resources. And I think that for me is one of the key things and the key pains that I have. Also the thing about context, and I think it's not about a digital divide, we're actually causing a knowledge divide. It's the most heartbreaking thing to know that the information that could change someone's life is right there at their fingertips, but they're unable to access it. Even though, it could have saved their life. Yeah. And that for me is just kind of unacceptable. I think, and just kind of think on the thing like innovation, I don't think it should be taught in business schools. I think it should be taught right there from infancy, the thing about creative thinking and innovation. Our people are naturally innovative. To survive in our societies, you have to be creative and innovative. So I think we need to kind of begin to bring that right in from the beginning, that innovation doesn't become just a buzzword, it becomes part of who you are. Yeah.
Hello. On the first point, I agree with Justin on. I'm also a free market champion, and I think it's interesting for Kenya if you you liberalized the getting licenses for telcos, and you could see the speed at which that infrastructure has been built out by private investment. Yeah. At the same time, when you drive in Nairobi, you know, it can take you a couple of hours to get 10 kilometers. So where the state is in charge of physical infrastructure, you can see the power of private investment.
Yeah.
So definitely it's private investment. I think that as government step out of the way, the private will come in and invest. And like the revolution of telcos in Africa is the proof of that. On the innovation question, also I don't believe that you can teach innovation. And most often I think that like innovation should come out of solving problems. And most problems that we get a lot of applications, most problem for people going in universities is where can they get the cheapest beer or the cheapest pizza. And that's maybe not the greatest problem for society. So mostly people who've been out working a bit, seen problems, I think these are the ones working in corporates, these are the ones we need to jump out of corporates. But of course they need to have a platform to jump to, like VC capital. So I think it's very important to see how can we actually bring them out of the corporate and create businesses.
But have the right
disrupt.
environment to thrive.
They know what is wrong, right, in the big corporations. So.
All right. We are completely out of time. You're going to get me fired. One word, one sentence.
I was going to give, God has blessed Africa with so many problems that if we solved those problems, we would become innovators.
Yeah.
I'm saying this very seriously because there is no Western country that would have discovered M-Pesa because it was a simple money transfer. But now the evolution of it is actually gone to the Western world. Yeah. So let us be happy. We have lots of problems. We work on them.
Thank you very much.